Hello, everybody. This is Nihar Chhaya. I'm a Fortune 50 executive coach and the host of LinkedIn Live's The Executive Experience. And I'm so happy to welcome my special guest, Maya Leibman, the Chief Information Officer at American Airlines this morning. Maya, how are you today?
I'm good, Nihar. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, we're so happy to have you, Maya. And for those of you that are just tuning in, would love to hear from where you're tuning in. Please feel free to type in the comment section where you're joining in from. Also, this is going to be a very informative discussion, hopefully interactive as well. So we welcome your questions from Maya. Please feel free to share and hit the like button so your network can tune in as well. And I'm really excited about this episode. You know, Maya is one of my favorite people in the world. She is someone that we got a chance to get to know each other about a couple years ago as I was working with American Airlines. And one of the things that I love about Maya is that, you know, as she's a senior executive with a lot of, leadership, authority, and impact, she's so down to earth and relatable, which I found in working with her, that as we have LinkedIn Live viewers come in and watch the show, I really think it's great to have leaders share some of the more vulnerable aspects about how they got to where they are. And so, Maya, I wanted to talk to you about your career journey, but also, maybe some pivotal experiences that you had along the way, including some of the missteps or some of the obstacles that you faced along the way.
Yeah, thanks. I'm happy to. When I hear other leaders speak, personally, I like hearing about their mistakes a lot more than I like hearing about their successes, because number one, they're always more interesting, but two, it just makes them a lot more relatable because, when you're seeing it's a leader up there and all they're talking about is all the great things that they've done, something doesn't ring quite as authentic about that. When I think about, things that I wish I could go back and redo, I sort of put them into two buckets. There's like the business mistakes, and then there's, I'll talk about those first. And, I just have so many, I don't even know where to start. There was a project that we did at American this was back in the 90s, called More Room Throughout Coach. The idea was we were going to just make more room available. We were going to extend the seat distance between the seats, the pitch. And the premise was that people would pay more for that because that was like the number one complaint that our customers had. And it was my team that did the analysis that said that this was worth doing. But indeed, what we found out is that people aren't willing to actually pay more for more pitch. And so we spent just squillions of dollars to remove seats from the aircraft, only to find that we couldn't command a revenue premium in that way. And we had to put them back on. That was probably one of the more costly mistakes, although as the head of technology organization, I've had several instances in which a piece of technology has stopped working and we've actually had to ground the airline, like planes couldn't take off as a result of that. That was pretty costly too. And let's see, there was this really big technology effort that we worked on for several years with a partner of ours. And I would say that over the course of those 2 years, maybe not even one line of code got written because it was so complex and we couldn't agree on how to do it. So those are all like the business mistakes. But to be honest, if I think about the things that really keep me up at night and the things that, I really wish I had a do-over on, they fall into the bucket of what I would call people mistakes. And these are things where, I said something that I thought was going to be funny, but it turned out to be a lot more cutting than I meant it to be. Or like one example, we had a vendor who we were working with, a partner on a piece of technology, and the piece of software of theirs just wasn't working super well. And instead of sort of finding a constructive way to work from them, I was a new leader and I just thought, I need to come down really hard on them. And I started like, you guys aren't performing. This is a disaster. Your software is lousy and we're going to walk away from this. We're going to sue you for breach of contract. That was just an awful partner. And in the end, finally, after a lot of this, they were like, well, screw you. We're actually going to walk away from this. And I was like, oh, no, that's not what I meant. Please don't do that. So, it's things like that where, when I wake up at 4 a.m. and I start churning on things that, that I wish I could have done better. It's really the people mistakes more than the business mistakes that I feel bad about.
Yeah. So you kind of ruminate about like what you said or what might have gone the wrong way.
Yeah, exactly. And, it comes down to, I know it sounds trite, but the saying that people won't remember what you did, they'll remember how you made them feel.
Yeah.
I think is really true.
What do you find in terms of your style after you find out that, after you kind of look back and you say, oh, I wish I did that differently. Like, have you found that you go back to that person later, or do you kind of just in your head, you just kind of have, you put a recording in your mind that says, I'm going to try to act differently in this situation going forward?
I think it depends on the situation. There have been times, fortunately, I've had people on my team who've been bold enough to tell me, when I've crossed the line. And I really so appreciate them for that. And that gives me the opportunity to go back to, they say, hey, listen, the way you said that really rubbed so-and-so the wrong way. It gives me the opportunity to go back to that person and say, I need a redo. And then there are some times where just in general, I've gotten more sensitive. I've realized that there are certain things that I just can't say or do. And I just kind of put those into my leadership toolkit.
Yeah. Well, I think, first of all, that's a great amount of self-awareness to think about, hey, I'm fallible and I need to, try to improve on certain things. But also there's an interesting point there, which is that you made your team comfortable enough to share with you, the feedback. I've written about this in various publications around like, what if you are like scaring your employees, not even intentionally, but what if you create a certain type of, power differential where people don't tell you what they're thinking. And it seems like you really created a sense of security. And we talked about this too, like, psychological safety. You have really emphasized that, I think, with your team to be able to like say, I can handle it. Like, tell me what's going on.
Yeah, we talk about it a lot. I will not in any way say that I have cracked the nut on that, and that, I have a team who, feels, completely safe. I think we're making progress, and the more we talk about it, the more progress we make. But it's critical. You don't want people. There's this funny story I have where I said something funny at work, and one of my coworkers, laughed. I came home and I told the same story, and my husband didn't laugh. And I said, hey, when I was at work, Stephen thought that was really funny. And my husband goes, I'm not paid to laugh at your jokes. Yeah. He was being funny, actually. But, he's right. I don't want people to laugh at my jokes that they don't think are funny. And I certainly don't want them to not tell me things that I should be hearing. So it's my responsibility to create that environment.
Yeah. Yeah, indeed. Hey, before I forget, let me give a shout out to some of the folks that are on the line here. We got John Budgick from East Stateside, Anna Garnica from New Hampshire. We had Abhishek Gupta from New Delhi, Sonia Hiramath from DFW and American. So quite a few folks joining in here. Again, please feel free to comment if you're joining in. Let us know if you have any questions for Maya. And we'll try to get to that as well. And Maya, the other thing I want to talk to you about, because a lot of the things that we're dealing with this year have been quite unprecedented. I think a friend of mine told me, he calls it the 3 Ps, pandemic, protest, and politics. And, they've all pretty much exhausted all of us to a certain extent, but also, I guess, elevated our awareness. And so, a lot of leaders I'm coaching right now are really dealing with the idea of how much to emphasize inclusion and diversity and gender, race issues into their leadership work. It's not just kind of keeping the business running, but all these other topics have really become a big priority. And I want to talk to you a little bit about, what's been your experience this year with respect to that awareness, and how do you feel like your team is responding to it? Have you had any kind of discoveries or journey in that area? With respect to being open to these topics that have come up this year?
Yeah, it's the three P's are, even if we just had one of them, it would be anxiety provoking, but to have all three is kind of a perfect storm, because, the country is in such turmoil right now. As far as the diversity and equity and inclusion, we are on a real journey here at American Airlines. Honestly, it wasn't that long ago that we had a travel advisory taken out by the NAACP, telling Black people that it wasn't, comfortable flying on American Airlines because of so many incidents that they had encountered. And there might be small things like, somebody asking, are you standing in the right line when they're waiting for, in the first class line or something like that. And we really took that experience to heart and said, how can we be better? We absolutely have to get better here. And we've been on a real journey. And it's gone all the way from an advisory from the NAACP to the most recent issue was, we were going to allow, or we did allow our team members to wear a Black Lives Matter pin. And we got, backlash from sort of the opposing viewpoint, like, how can you do that? That's so awful. And, so I'm actually really proud of the stance that we took and the journey that we've been on to recognize that, our Black team members are not doing okay. And we have a lot of, we need to provide a lot of support. We need to be allies. And we need to allow things, as simple, it's so ridiculous. It should, saying that Black Lives Matter should be about as controversial as the other things we do here, like donating 1 million pounds of food to the homeless or standing up to cancer. But, sadly, it isn't. And we need to continue to fight that fight. Within my own organization, we're spending a lot of time talking about it. We are developing programs for our Black team members, mentorship programs. We put this in place recently for our Black leaders in the IT organization. And it was funny, sort of the feedback that as we were preparing for this that I got. So from our Black team members, I heard, or from our non-Black team members, I heard, listen, we need to, this is the right thing to do. We need to be providing an opportunity for them. For our, I heard that. And I also heard, look, this has to be for all of our diverse team members. It can't just be for our Black team members. And then from our Black team members, I heard, thank you for doing this for us. If you make this for all Black team members, if all diverse team members, then we, will continue to be at a disadvantage. We'll never sort of close that gap. And I heard from other Black team members, look, I don't want you to single me out. I don't want to be identified differently. And so I heard opposing views from every single person. So the only thing that I knew is that once we did this, we were going to make somebody unhappy.
Yes.
And so, but it was, we were guided by the facts. And the facts are that there is systemic racism, that there is a disadvantage for our Black team members, and we need to provide a more equitable experience. And this is one of the ways in which we're doing it.
Yeah, I find that it's become a situation where if you don't say anything, then it's just as bad as picking the wrong side.
Yeah.
And so the idea of having to do something, otherwise you look like you're either being complicit or being apathetic to the cause. So it seems like just you guys taking some kind of a step was at least a win, no matter what.
Yeah, for sure. And I totally agree with you. One of the quotes I like is that the opposite of racist isn't not racist, it's anti-racist. Like, it's not enough not to just not say anything or just say, oh, I'm not racist. Right. You actually have to take action and be an anti-racist. I think that's the environment that we're trying to create here. Yeah,
and you mentioned you were reading some books that were around that topic, right?
Yeah, I've read a bunch of books as part of sort of my own personal journey. One of them was called White Fragility, and it's a really interesting and very sort of stark and in your face look at why it's so hard for white people to talk about racism. And there was this interesting experience where the author makes the assertion that one of the reasons that when like a group of white people are together and somebody tells sort of a racist joke or something, nobody calls them out because of this, that it would be breaking with this concept of white solidarity. Mm-hmm. And so I was listening to this book actually on my, on my phone on the way to the airport one day. And it was, it said, I was listening to this concept and I thought, that's never going to happen to me. I'm never going to have the opportunity to break with white solidarity because no one ever says anything racist around me. And then I was on the plane and there was a group of people and we were standing in the back galley and talking. And one of the passengers says, I really like flying American on certain aircraft, but on these other aircraft, they just look really old and tired. And another, one of our flight attendants said, yeah, I never really thought I would be here so long. I remember when these aircraft, the 767s were brand new, I never thought I'd be here so long to see them look so ghetto. And then she said, I know that's not a PC thing to say. And then I thought, oh my God, it's happening. It's happening right now. Somebody's saying something. What should I do? Should I call her out? But what, is this the right environment to do that? If I say something, what should I say? Well, wait, what's really wrong with ghetto? What would I say? I don't really understand. And then of course, now the moment has long since passed. We're like 10 minutes further on in the conversation. But it's like stuff like that has given me a lot more awareness. I may not have even registered that comment prior to reading. But what I think is really interesting is right now I'm reading like 3 different books. And I know that makes me sound like some sort of intellectual, like big reader, but the fact that I haven't finished any of them, I think should be an indication that I'm not a huge reader. But what I thought was so interesting is that, one of them was about this whole, the whole issue of bias and racism. But the other 2, one is about artificial intelligence. It's called "You Look Like a Thing and I Love You," and okay. It's about AI and machine learning. And it also touches on the theme of bias and how the fact that we're training these algorithms from a data set that probably has built-in racism with it. For example, one of the examples they give is that they had an AI that was helping do ratings of restaurants, and all the Mexican restaurants were getting negative ratings because the AI was learning based on just crawling the internet. And there were so many articles that equated Mexican with illegal or Mexican with other negative terms. And so as a result, Mexican restaurants were getting negative ratings. I mean, it's just crazy. And that's just a small example. I mean, it goes on to like, who's getting loans and who's getting better medical treatment. And it's, bias is really critical as technology grows. And the other one was about schooling. And there was a whole, concept underpinning schooling and how kids are educated, that in which bias plays a really big role. And so while I expected to see bias in the book about bias, I didn't expect to see it in the other 2 books that I'm reading. And it's just, it's just something that we have to be really conscious of right now and really intentional about.
Yeah, it's fascinating. All 3 of your examples really resonate with me. And in particular, that first one, I find that it takes a lot of courage to speak up in those situations. I mean, we've all kind of probably been to Thanksgiving dinner and you got the crazy uncle, whatever, but it's like, you don't want to create conflict. You don't want, and a lot of times people will say, why are you so sensitive? Or you're not Black, what do you care, right? Or whatever it might be. And this is the time when you realize that it's down to us to actually speak up more than anything else. Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Let me see. We have a question here from Nadia Syed. Question from Maya. As we talk to other CXOs, the common theme we are hearing is, as horrible as COVID has been, the silver lining has been that it's created an opportunity for organizations to really rebuild in a more efficient way. COVID has forced organizations to look at things differently and challenge some long-held beliefs around remote work, productivity, et cetera. How has the pandemic accelerated or impacted AA's digital transformation journey? That's such a good question. And Nadia, you're so right. I mean, when this first started, there was an inclination of just sort of thinking, oh my God, this is this awful situation. What has it taken away? And we really forced ourselves to think about what has this situation made possible rather than what has it taken away.
I think that one of the biggest things is that it forced us to make decisions a lot faster than we would have normally. You know, we had this real crisis and we had to react to it quickly. And so things that would have normally taken us a year to do, as we debated them, as we analyzed them, as we brought the numbers forward, as we discussed the pros and cons, and then as we executed them, you know, we did them like in just a couple days. From a digital standpoint, one of the things that we realized early on is that customers don't want to necessarily touch the kiosk when they come to the airport. Most customers can check in on AA.com or on our mobile app, but if they come to the airport and they haven't done that, or if they come to the airport and they've checked in online, but they now need to check a bag, we force them to go through the kiosk. One of the things we did just super quickly is say, we need to make this a touchless experience. So, you know, in normal times, that would have taken us a really long time to prioritize and to execute. And this time we did it in just a few weeks and got it out to all of our self-service kiosks. I think as far as remote work, I had never been a super big fan of work from home. What the pandemic taught me is that what I didn't like about it is when there were one or two people on a team who were working from home while the rest of the team was in the office. But once we saw that if everybody's remote, that can be a really great experience. You know, I've always known that there are a lot of benefits from working from home. I mean, there's the psychological benefits of not having to get up and get going and get on the road and deal with traffic and deal with just the psychic energy that's involved in being in the world. But I didn't, really want to promote it because I didn't love the idea of 80% of the team having a face-to-face experience and then a few people not. So now, as we think about work going forward, how can we develop a hybrid experience that really takes advantage of the best of both worlds, where we have people in the office who can really interact with each other and have the value of that face-to-face communication and have that focus time at home to really dig in and move things forward.
You know, that's a great point that you just brought up because it was another question I was going to talk to you about. Like, those of you that are tuning in here, Maya did a TEDx talk last year, I believe it was last year, which was great. You guys got to definitely check it out, and we'll put a link in the comments for that TEDx talk. But it really was about Maya's emphasis on connection at work. And I think what you touched on was really actually pretty interesting, because we always look at like open office or coming to work versus remote as like a binary thing. But actually, it's not really as much about where you are. It's about are you together wherever you are.
Yeah, I think that's a good observation. So I did this TED talk around the importance of human connection, and I used the open office as kind of a template for it, and talked a lot about how people need proximity. They need to be close to each other. They need to be seeing each other and interacting. And then, like 2 months later, COVID hit, and proximity was no longer. My talk was no longer COVID friendly. Yeah. So it doesn't work as well in the world of social distancing, but the concept is still the same, that we really need human connection. We have to work harder at it when we're on video, but I think it can still be accomplished.
Yeah, and are there things? So one of the things that I think you pointed out, which was a really a strong concept around how to develop connection with your colleagues, was when you're having proximity with them, you hear things that you definitely wouldn't have thought about, in their absence, right? Whether that's just knowing what their family life is like, or what they're doing after work, whatever it might be. Have you found any kind of strategies or ways to kind of mimic that now that we're all, working from home, or some of us are in the office?
Yeah, it's funny. One of the examples I like to give is when we first moved to this open office concept, I learned more about the guy sitting across from me in like 2 hours than I had in the entire 2 years that I had worked with him. And it just came from just seeing him, maybe overhearing some stuff, but also just interacting with him in a way that you can't when you're in, have four walls and a door around you. And for myself, the same has happened. Like when I first moved to the open office concept, like if I needed to have a personal phone call or something, like I'd go and find, one of our little breakout rooms and go in there. And after a while, I was just like, this is too, number one, it's too big a hassle every time, the phone rings to go find a place, but it's also, look, at this time, if I can't be myself during this pandemic, then there's like almost no other time I'm going to be able to be open and vulnerable. So like my assistant, like all the people around me now hear me like making doctor's appointments with my dermatologist to talk about hair loss, or, with our therapist to bring our son to family therapy. It's like, screw it. It's like, we all have something. And, it's almost, I almost like that they can hear this stuff, because it makes it easier for me to deal with this stuff, to have this support network, and to not have to feel like I'm hiding something. It's just too exhausting to be somebody who you're not for any length of time. You can do it for a little while, but after a while, it's just too tiring.
Yeah, and like that's what I said kind of at the beginning of this, is like one of the things that I think you have down, whether you, I'm sure you go through those moments as well of like, what did I say, whatever. But the truth is, I really feel like you have a way of laughing about some of these things, or like maybe not taking it so seriously, because that really is, I feel like with all the leadership challenges we talk about in coaching, or even when we read about it in articles and books, there's a need for being vulnerable, and it doesn't have to be so heavy either. Like, oh, woe is me. It could be like, you know what? Like, yeah, we have family issues, or I have a personal issue. I'm dealing with anxiety, whatever it might be, right? And I love that now we're having more of an impetus for people to say, why hide it? I mean, just yesterday I was in a meeting with a client, and my dog started whining and making noise, and I'm like, it's my dog. Like before, I would have been embarrassed. I would have been like, oh my God, it's unprofessional. But everybody knows that we're dealing with this stuff. And not to say that there's anything good coming out of the pandemic, but in some ways, this has almost created a certain sense of just being open and honest with ourselves.
Yeah, I hope people are doing that, because it feels like in this time that everybody is trying their best, but nobody is really at their best. I mean, it is impossible with those 3 Ps that you talked about to be at your best right now. And so if everybody's trying their best, then we got to give each other a lot of grace. My son deals with depression, and he, so we talk to him a lot about talking to himself as though he was talking to a good friend, like be kind to yourself. And if I don't take that same advice and sort of laugh about the things that, that are happening, then I can't really, in good conscience, give him that advice.
Yeah, it's so true. We all, can benefit from using our own advice for our own lives. Maya, I know we just have a few more minutes here. There was a question actually that came in, and I'm going to try to read it to you. Question for Maya, and thanks so much, Nihar and Maya, for this session. You began with a discussion of some of the challenges you faced early on and what you learned from them. I imagine your role today requires making lots of decisions that are quite difficult. For example, having a difficult conversation or making a zero-sum decision. Assuming that all the appropriate preparation was done to make sure it was the right thing to do, how do you feel afterwards, and what do you do to reassure yourself? I assume that it was the right thing to do.
That's a good question. Look, I'd love to say I never go back and agonize over decisions, but I do it all the time. So I'm not sure I'm the best person to give advice. If you've done the work up front, if you've done the analysis, if you have talked to the people that you need to talk to, if you've weighed the pros and cons, and you still need to make this difficult decision, then at the end of the day, you can't go back and second guess. You just need to move forward. I think a lot of people get hung up on mistakes that they've made. One of my mentors early on told me, you can think of your career as sort of like a bank account, and you're making deposits as you do good things, and you're making withdrawals as you make mistakes. And, the only thing is just to keep a slightly positive balance.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it'll be wildly positive. Sometimes it might go below zero, but who cares? The net is positive. And if you're working hard, then that's going to happen no matter what. So I would say don't don't worry about revisiting after the fact every single decision.
Yeah, and I think I always hold on to the pratfall effect, which is that if people think people know you're competent, and you make mistakes, you actually become more appealing and attractive.
Yeah,
It's when they don't know that you're competent that you're like, oh wow, this person's kind of failing. But when they already know, so I imagine people, with your already being successful, it's like it actually benefits you to show more of that side of yourself.
Could be.
Yeah, let's see if we might not bet on that, but yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Maya, I really want to thank you for being with us. I know that you're busy, so don't want to take it too long past the time here. But any parting thoughts or anything that you want to share? I know that I'd love to encourage people to follow Maya on LinkedIn. Please follow me if you haven't already as well. Anything that you that comes to mind before we let you go?
No, I think I would just echo again the comment that, look, we're all doing our best right now. We may not all be at our best, and we just need to give each other a lot of grace during this difficult time.
Wonderful. Great words. Maya, thank you again for your time. Thanks for everybody for joining in here, and we'll wish you a great rest of your day.
Yeah. And thank you, Nihar. You have been a terrific coach and guide to me in my career as well. So thank you for everything you've done.
Thank you, Maya. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.